Hello everybody, we are going live today with Michali to answer a question that's been posted on our forums. It's a really good question. Michali is going to read it for us. It's actually a little bit long. We're just going to wait for some of you to show up. Hello Stacy, thank you for joining. We're just waiting for Michali. Hey Michali, let me add you. Hi,
Hello.
how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Yeah, good to see you. To like move
Nice
my
to
phone
see you too.
10 miles away so that my face is actually somewhat shown.
I know. I'm always like,
Yeah.
yeah. Um,
Nice. Okay, we have a
so we have a long question
I,
today.
I know, but it's a good one, so I figured we'll take advantage of it.
Oh, yes. Yes. It's a great one. Okay. So this is from Holding On.
Mhm.
And it reads, Hi, thank you for this wonderful platform. I discovered I experienced childhood trauma. I'm working with a trauma therapist, and it is taking me a very long time for me to be open with her. She is only aware of my situation to a limited extent, and therefore I can really use some support in the meantime until I feel safe enough to share with her and get the guidance and support I need.
Mhm.
I'm single, living at home with unhealthy parents, one of them who is codependent and doesn't respect my boundaries and makes me feel unsafe. My needs are constantly not heard and even denied, and this parent attempts to control me to get their own needs met. As I am in therapy and I'm noticing more and more how twisted this dynamic is, it is becoming increasingly difficult to handle being in such a painful, unhealthy environment. Number one, I'm struggling in how to frame my situation. Do toxic relationships like these require total cutoff in order to protect my own needs? And number two, it is extremely hard to do therapy work when surrounded by people who don't allow me to take care of my needs and make me feel like I have no space to be free and independent. However, the idea of physically distancing myself to be on my own is utterly terrifying and heartbreaking that I am choosing to remain in a toxic environment that is impeding my healing. Is physical distance something needed for recovery, even when the idea of it activates trauma? I feel totally stuck and would really appreciate any encouragement, feedback, or advice.
Well, yeah, it's a heavy dose.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
are your thoughts?
You're asking me first, Faye. Okay.
I always like
um,
say, and then I just say yes, 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 and then we both.
um, so, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, even before addressing the crux
Mhm.
of the question, is, I think it's so important that this person really works on in therapy, learning how to open up to the therapist. And sometimes it's not the right fit of a therapist. Like I've talked to many people who said like, I just can't share this with a therapist, or I can't say this to a therapist. And they could have worked with the therapist for months, if not years. And that sometimes indicates that it might not be the right fit. Doesn't have to be, but I think at the very least, I would recommend that this person says, look, there's plenty of stuff that I haven't shared with you that really impacts my life. And I'm finding that I have a block in sharing it with you. Now, this person should expect the right response that the therapist should have
Mhm.
is to say, okay, well, I'm not forcing you to share anything that you don't want to share. Let's talk about this discomfort. So the therapeutic work should be focused on the discomfort of talking about something, not forcing the client or pushing the client to talk about something that they're not ready to talk about.
Mhm.
So that's number one in terms of like how to assess if the therapist is the right fit for you, and if they can work with you where you're at, which is uncomfortable with opening up.
Mhm.
The second thing is also in terms of finding the right therapist. If this person experienced childhood trauma that's preventing them from making healthy choices for themselves, then it might be helpful to go to a trauma specialist first.
Mhm.
Because if the trauma is going to get in the way of other therapeutic work, then that would be the first thing that needs to be addressed.
Mhm.
Um, which leads me to the actual questions.
He's not in trauma therapy, or that's ambiguous.
It seems, you know what? My bad. She is working with a trauma therapist.
Okay, that's what I
So
thought.
yeah.
So good.
So
So,
that is good. That is good. But I would probably want to order the treatment to be around that
Hmm.
rather than, let's say, I'm trying to think like it seems like what they're working on right now is just going through it, is like bringing her more awareness as to like the dynamic in her home, which is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. But I do think that the part where she's getting stuck in terms of, or he's getting stuck, I don't know if it's a girl or guy, in terms of making the decision to create distance, which is part of the question. If they can't, if they don't feel like they're having a free choice either way, and the thing that's causing them to make a choice is something out of their control, like trauma, or other people, then that's the place that I would work on. Because when it comes to life choices that are good for ourselves, we should feel like we are empowered to make the right choices for ourselves. And anything that gets in the way needs to be looked at and examined,
Hmm.
and healed. So in terms of like cutoff from toxic relationships, so I have a more black and white perspective, like personally, when it comes to toxic relationships. I do think that in an abusive situation, the healthiest thing that we can do for ourselves is to create as much distance as possible, at least until we have some of the tools to navigate those situations. One of them being that we can always remove ourselves from an unsafe situation.
Hmm.
Now, this person, explains like one of their parents, doesn't respect their boundaries and things like that. That's a dynamic that's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be toxic, and it can just be like the parent is really unhealthy and needs to learn how to break that codependency. But I think, when this person uses the word unsafe, I would want to hear more about that as the therapist, like what is making this person unsafe.
Hmm.
Um, and but if there is a lack of safety and this person really truly identifies their situation to be toxic and or abusive, then the best thing the person can do is to create distance so that they have a safe base. At the very least, they don't have to cut off ties completely, but it's important to have in like an anchor in their lives and to have like a home base that is safe.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think
and then the last one.
that was her first question. Like, do I have to cut off ties completely, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I
So
don't,
it's
I don't
going to depend on the level of dysfunction.
correct
Like, I don't know how dysfunctional it is and how harmful it is ultimately for this person.
impacting this person, but I think that we're steps away from like the black white cutoff ties. Like from the way
Yeah,
asked, I feel like we're steps away from that. Like I feel like there's if you're just becoming aware of this dynamic now and it's still so fresh to you, this awareness, that means that there's also so much that you can still do within this environment to protect yourself. That means that you probably
yeah,
haven't step yet. And that all that
that's a good point.
all that being said, I think we're a product of our environments. I think we're the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. So knowing all that, yes, this is going to impact you as to the extent that you create distance, meaning or lack thereof. But that still doesn't mean that you ever have to be black white, completely cut off. I'm just using your terminology, but like, and I'm sure you would agree with that. Like, I don't think that has to be the answer. I think that there's so many steps in the spectrum prior to that. Like, there's ways to have
Yeah,
independence really healthy enough that you're not being impacted, and also creating that physical distance that you're not being impacted miles before complete cutoff. I don't necessarily think that's at all the next step, or even like the first like healthy solution, so to speak, to like that should have
yeah,
so many better goals before that one.
yeah, yeah. So I think it would be like tackling the trauma and and also talking about the discomfort, processing the discomfort. That would be like step number one. Step number two is learning to create and maintain healthy boundaries. This is something I talk a lot about to my clients, which is like boundaries are, it's our job to create our boundaries, and it's
Yeah.
also our job to maintain boundaries. The power isn't in other people's hands, it's in our hands. And if someone doesn't respect our boundaries, then it's still within our control to decide what to do about that. So we create safety. And sometimes the way we do that is by creating distance,
Mhm.
right? Like there's no mitzvah to stay on the phone with someone who's abusive, right? You're allowed to hang up the phone if someone's speaking to you in an abusive manner. Same thing with being in a room with someone who's attacking you and being physically and not, of course, physically, but verbally and emotionally abusive to you in that moment, there's no mitzvah to stay in the room. You can leave the room and say, I would love to have a conversation with you, but not like this. This does not feel safe for me, and to leave the room. And I think it's the same way with relationships. So going to the second question, it sounds like there's a lot of attachment, like they mentioned, like the heartbreak, and that's natural. It's natural to love our parents. And even if they're toxic for us, even if they're abusive, there's no place for, no one can replace a mother and a father. We all need a mother and a father. And I think that, even if we have to create safety and health for ourselves by physically distancing ourselves from our parents, that doesn't mean that there isn't a grief process. And this person, I think, when they use the word heartbreaking, I think that's a really accurate description of what that process can feel like. Right. It's a break. You're literally breaking the attachment that you've had, and that can be heartbreaking. And so I think just going through the question, I think you can do it in baby steps, and maybe that would be a good place to start also with a therapist, is like saying like, what are some little steps I can take today to create some distance? It doesn't even have to be confrontational. It could be something like, choosing to like hang out with friends 3 nights a week instead of 1 night a week, just getting yourself out. Like, I love what you said, like it's, who we surround ourselves with is so important and impactful to our health. So like, surround yourself with other people, as a first step, kind of thing.
Correct. And it could even be like a mental of creating distance, like if you would typically get like into a whole conversation about something that is harmful for you and not, promoting your health, then you can choose to not get into that conversation, not instigate or not continue it.
Yes. Yes.
Reframe whatever comment that parent made to something that doesn't feel as, toxic, so to speak. Yeah, so that's kind of like totally, there was something that you said that I had something to say on, but I lost my train of thought for a second. But definitely, like, I like how you like down into like, the first thing is to like understand the trauma first. The second is to then start creating this, like these little changes. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Like, it sounds like what they're scared of is the actual physical, like leaving. That's from the way I read the question. Again, it could be different.
Yeah.
But like the actual, like, how do I leave? And again, I would say slow steps. You don't have to, because you know that you're in a toxic environment, that does not mean that you have to like now find a place to live. You can, like there's way more steps that you can take to break away emotionally and physically slowly prior to that, like, I'm moving out. So that's kind of like the way I just understood the question. That last part where she was saying how afraid she would be to like leave. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. 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 I agree. I think the fear of like the physical distance is definitely something to process. It's not something to ignore. But I think that, for if the questioner is asking like, what do I do right now? If these are the things that you can process with your therapist, that might feel more comfortable for you than like kind of going into the specifics of the trauma, and opening up with other things. And then identifying little baby steps that you can take to create distance, as exactly what you said, like mentally and or physically, so that they're not like constantly exposed to toxicity, so yeah.
We hit it. Yeah. Thank you, Michali. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope, of course, questioner, and I feel like it's a very common question on different people have it on different streams, different levels, but I think that this can help many people. So happy that we were able to address it. Thanks, Michali. And thank you everyone for tuning in.
Oh, my pleasure. I'll see you on Monday.
Yeah, next week we're doing Monday, just a heads up for everybody, but we'll make that, announcement as well on Instagram and WhatsApp. Alrighty.
Amazing. See you next week.
Sure.
Bye.